everything changed in a matter of seconds. Welcome back to NFL Nexus. I'm your host, and today we are bringing you a deep dive explainer on ledgers, legends, and the absolute ticking clock over in Denver. We are stepping straight into the long, dark shadows of Mile High. Because look, wearing the orange and blue of the Denver Broncos, it isn't just about throwing on a uniform and taking the field. It's a weight. A legendary, almost suffocating weight. When you walk through those tunnels, you are inheriting the ghosts of John Elway. You're carrying the aura of Peyton Manning. You're carrying the expectations of back-to-back world championships. It is stepping onto a field where greatness isn't just, politely requested. It is demanded. It's demanded by over 76,000 screaming fans who vividly remember exactly what it feels like to stand at the absolute, undisputed summit of the sporting world. But behind the roaring crowds, behind that cinematic glow of the stadium lights, there is a brutal, unglamorous, hidden reality. And it's a reality built entirely on ledgers, on spreadsheets, on the cutthroat, razor-thin margins of NFL roster construction. So today, we are analyzing the impending storm brewing right now in Denver's front office, a storm where the grandeur of history is on a direct, high-speed collision course with an unforgiving future.
So you really have to ask yourself, how much does a legacy actually cost? It's the exact question that keeps general managers awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, just staring at the ceiling in a cold sweat. Because in the National Football League, past glory, it doesn't buy you a single extra cent of salary cap space. None. Zero. You are plunged instantly into this high-stakes financial dread where the grandeur of team history violently collides with the cold, unforgiving mathematics of the modern NFL. And look, the Broncos have this deeply entrenched legacy of paying for transcendent wide receiver play. The fan base demands it, the ownership demands it, it's in the DNA of the franchise, right? But what happens when that astronomical bill finally comes due for the next generation? To really understand the crushing financial pressure of tomorrow, we first have to agonize over the microscopic physical toll of yesterday. We have to look at what built this mountain.
The foundation of this pressure cooker in Denver, it isn't just built on names in a record book. It is blood. It is sweat. It is absolute physical sacrifice. Let's just look back at the 1960s. Lionel Taylor. Think about the era here. We're talking leather-trimmed pads, gridiron mud, an era where receivers were routinely, and I mean routinely, battered across the middle of the field with absolute impunity. There was no holding back. And in 1961, Taylor became the very first player in professional football history to catch 100 passes in a single season. Let that microscopic detail just sink in for a second. In a run-heavy league where throwing the ball was basically a secondary thought, he averaged an astonishing 102.9 yards per game as a rookie. It's a franchise record that still stands today like this ancient, immovable monument. He set the absolute baseline for what it means to catch a pass in Denver. Then, fast forward to the 1980s, Steve Watson. Now here's an undrafted free agent out of Temple. Nobody, and I mean nobody, expected this guy to survive training camp, let alone the regular season, but he clawed his way onto the roster. He fought through every brutal jam at the line of scrimmage, every crushing hit, and he eventually led the entire NFL with 13 touchdowns in his third year. And in the 1984 playoffs, against the legendary hard-hitting Pittsburgh Steelers, 11 catches, a franchise record, 177 agonizing yards. Then, the 1990s roll around. Ed McCaffrey, the enforcer. We love to celebrate the catching stats, but McCaffrey's legacy was forged in the brutal trench warfare downfield. He consistently served as the human battering ram for Terrell Davis. McCaffrey took bone-crushing hits from linebackers, literally sacrificing his own body, willingly throwing himself into blocks on the perimeter just to give Davis 1 extra inch of room to breathe. That physical destruction of his own body, that is the true, hidden price of back-to-back Super Bowls. And we absolutely cannot forget Rod Smith, 1994 to 2006. Undrafted out of Missouri Southern State. He spent his entire first year rotting on the practice squad, completely invisible to the rest of the league. So what did he do? He worked. He bled in practice. And in Super Bowl 33 against the Atlanta Falcons, he hauls in 5 catches for 152 yards, culminating in an 80-yard touchdown strike that physically broke the opponent's spirit on the world's biggest stage. And finally, the iconic number 88, Demaryius Thomas, a beacon of absolute consistency. Super Bowl 50 champion. We all remember it, right? The 80-yard dagger on the first play of overtime against Pittsburgh with Tim Tebow. A simple slant route turned into a legendary stiff arm and a foot race that literally shook the foundation of the stadium. This right here is the mountain that every new receiver in Denver has to climb. The weight of Taylor, Watson, McCaffrey, Smith, and Thomas. But climbing that mountain in today's NFL, well, it requires monumental capital.
Which brings us abruptly, and honestly kind of violently, back to the nerve-wracking present. Listen to the slow, deliberate words of head coach Sean Payton. He said, Every time we continue to ask him down the field, give him these opportunities, he takes advantage of it. He's doing well. Peyton is talking about Marvin Mims Jr., the very first draft pick of the Sean Payton era. The man specifically brought in to carry that legendary torch we just talked about. And Mims is a player who hasn't just lined up out wide, right? He has played running back in a pinch. He has been the ultimate gadget weapon. He has completely flipped the field as a dynamic returner. And when the playoffs were on the line last season, when the receiving core was utterly decimated by a brutal string of injuries, Mims stepped out of the shadows. He became the team's leading postseason receiver. He didn't just play. He answered the bell when the very survival of the season was at stake. But here's the thing. Doing well in the National Football League, it means something very, very specific behind the scenes. It means you are about to get incredibly expensive.
Because behind closed doors, agents are making a meticulous, cutthroat comparison. On one side of the ledger, you have Marvin Mims Jr., a second-team All-Pro as a rookie, a first-team All-Pro returner the very next year. He is already a two-time Pro Bowler before even hitting his absolute physical prime. On the other side, the direct market comparison, Rashid Shaheed over in Seattle. A two-time Pro Bowl returner himself, an explosive player, there's absolutely no doubt about that. But Shaheed just signed a brand new contract for $17 million a year. Now listen closely to the microscopic details of the business of football here, because this is where it gets spicy. Marvin Mims Jr. recently fired his agent, and he went out and hired Athletes First to represent him. Look, that is not a subtle move. Athletes First is an absolute powerhouse agency. That move, that is a siren blaring in the Broncos front office at deafening volumes. That is a cutthroat declaration that he is demanding top dollar. Agents all across the league are currently projecting Mims' absolute floor at around $11 to $13 million. But with his resume, a resume that is, let's be honest, arguably stronger and more decorated than Shaheed's, his new camp could realistically walk straight into General Manager George Patton's office, slam a folder on the mahogany desk, and demand the Shaheed money.
$17 million. Just let that microscopic number sink into your mind for a moment. Let the immense financial dread of that figure wash over you. $17 million a year for a player the Broncos have historically treated as their number 5 receiver in offensive snap counts. Yes, he is an all-pro returner. Yes, he flips the field position and sets the offense up for success. But $17 million? That is foundational money. It is the kind of money you pay a cornerstone left tackle to protect your quarterback's blind side. It's the money you pay a premier pass rusher to hunt the opposing quarterback. It is the exact kind of money that dictates who stays and who is forced to pack their bags, empty their locker, and leave town in the middle of the night. Because the Broncos have said it themselves to the media over and over. They cannot pay everyone. Actually, no team can. The salary cap is a cruel, uncompromising master. And the math is about to get genuinely terrifying.
This whole situation is building into an absolute financial time bomb. We really need to agonize over the microscopic math here, because this is exactly where dreams of a dynasty go to die. Look at the impending reality of the year 2027. Courtland Sutton, the current veteran anchor of that receiving room, has a salary cap hit that detonates at an astronomical $28.4 million. Jalen Waddle, sitting out there as a premier market comparison around the league, is sitting at $27 million. So if you cave to the pressure, if you pay Marvin Mims Jr. $17 or $18 million, where does the money physically come from? The NFL operates on a hard cap. It's not like baseball. You have lockdown corners like Riley Moss and Jaquan McMillian hitting a contract year right when this bill comes due. You have a bruising left guard in Ben Powers who absolutely needs to be paid to protect the pocket. You have a safety like Brandon Jones commanding significant capital. Every single dollar you spend on Mims is a dollar stolen from the protection of your franchise quarterback. It is a dollar ripped directly away from the lockdown coverage of your secondary. But all of these numbers, Sutton's $28 million, Mims' potential $17 million, honestly, they pale in absolute comparison to the gargantuan shadow that is lurking right at the bottom of the ledger.
$50 million. This is it. This is the ultimate paralyzing constraint looming over George Paton, the quarterback tax. Because the quarterback market leaps forward violently every single year. I mean, just look at Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence. The Broncos will be heavily incentivized to extend their young quarterback, Bo Nix, the very second he is eligible in 2027. Assuming he avoids major injury and continues his current upward trajectory, that extension framework, it is likely already being drafted in hushed tones behind closed doors right now. It will start at $40 million, and it will easily grow to $50 million annually. When your quarterback commands $50 million of your salary cap, the rest of the 52 men on that roster are suddenly forced to survive on scraps. The margin for error drops to absolute zero. You literally cannot miss on a third-round draft pick. You cannot overpay a return specialist no matter how dynamic they are. If you miscalculate by even $1 or $2 million, the entire foundation of the franchise crumbles into dust. So what happens when the money actually runs out? What happens when you are so hyper-focused on paying the high-priced cinematic offense that you kind of forget the other side of the ball entirely? We have to shift attention now, away from the $50 million quarterbacks and the $17 million receivers. We need to travel down into the hidden life-or-death trench warfare at the back end of the defense. Because when you can't afford highly drafted superstars across the board, you have to find cheap, ruthless efficiency in the absolute shadows of the roster.
Enter the big nickel. Now, in defensive coordinator Vance Joseph's scheme, this isn't just a defensive package you throw out there on 3rd and long. It is a fundamental philosophy. It utilizes a third safety on the field to counter the hyper-fast modern passing attacks of the NFL that are constantly trying to exploit mismatches with athletic tight ends and shifty slot receivers. It demands exceptional versatility. The player must be able to cover a receiver in space, smoothly turn his hips, but also possess brutal, open-field tackling ability to come downhill and bring down a 220-pound running back in the gap. For years, this critical, unglamorous role belonged to P.J. Locke. But remember what we just talked about? The money ran out. The Broncos couldn't promise Locke a starting job, and they certainly couldn't pay him the contract he desired on the open market. So, Locke walked out the door and signed with the Dallas Cowboys. He left behind a strategic void, a gaping, critical vulnerability in the armor of Vance Joseph's defense. And the looming battle to fill that void in the sweltering heat of training camp, well, it is going to be absolutely ruthless.
Because the math in the safety room is just brutal. Talanoa Hufanga and Brandon Jones, they are locked in as your starting duo. Their seats at the table are completely secured by their veteran contracts and their past production. But NFL teams typically only keep 4 safeties on the final 53-man roster. That leaves a terrifying mathematical equation for the rest of these men. You have Devin Key, he's your all-pro special teams ace, and he is actively shifting his focus to defense to try and claim Locke's old role. Then there's Tyson Anderson. He was just brought in from the outside as a $1.5 million preemptive insurance policy. And then there's J.L. Skinner, a former draft pick fighting for his absolute survival in a contract year. And let's not forget the undrafted players like Miles Scott and Parker Robertson lurking in the shadows, just waiting for one of the veterans to slip up or pull a hamstring. Think about the human element here. 5 men. 2 spots. Careers will literally end this summer in Denver. Families will have to pack up and move. It is the cold, hard reality of August in the NFL.
Let's zoom in on the primary battle unfolding on the practice field right now. Devin Key has the established pedigree in the building. He has literally bled for this team on special teams coverage units. He has earned the deep respect of the coaching staff, and therefore, he gets a very first look at Locke's former big nickel role. But George Patton didn't just hand him the keys to the defense, no pun intended. He went out and signed Tyson Anderson. Now, Anderson is a former 5th-round pick with 0 career defensive starts to his name, but the front office handed him $1.5 million fully guaranteed on a 1-year deal. Why? Why do that? Because Anderson possesses a dangerously high football IQ. The strategy here is deeply microscopic. If Devin Key wins a defensive role, his snap count increases dramatically, which means he physically cannot play special teams as much without risking total exhaustion. So Anderson is the preemptive strike. He's there to replace Key on special teams while simultaneously threatening to steal his defensive reps. Every single practice rep, every single backpedal drill in that thin July altitude is a desperate, claustrophobic fight for survival between these 2 men.
And the coaches are watching them like hawks, evaluating every micro movement. Listen to special teams coordinator Darren Rizzi talk about Tyson Anderson. He says he's a mature player with a high football IQ. I'm looking forward to seeing him in pads during the preseason, but so far, he's been exactly as advertised. Exactly as advertised. Think about that. Those 3 words from a demanding coordinator, they are a death knell for someone else on the roster. They place immense, suffocating pressure squarely on the shoulders of J.L. Skinner. Skinner was a 2023 draft pick. He came into the league with immense pedigree, part of Sean Payton's very first draft class. He has been a solid contributor, arguably the 2nd-best special teams player on the roster. But he enters the final year of his rookie contract having failed to crack the rotation and earn Vance Joseph's trust on defense. With Anderson arriving, securing that guaranteed money, and Rizzi singing his praises to the media, J.L. Skinner is suddenly staring down the terrifying end of his Broncos tenure. He will not go quietly into the night. He will absolutely fight for his livelihood. But the math is merciless.
Look, to survive the brutal reality of the NFL offseason, you really need to know the truth behind the headlines.
You need the absolute deep dive into the microscopic details that define a franchise. So I need you to command your allegiance right now. Subscribe to NFL Nexus. Hit the like button on this explainer to appease the algorithm and help us uncover the truth around the league. Comment your thoughts below. Who do you think survives the bloodbath in the safety room? Does Marvin Mims Jr. force George Paton's hand and secure his $17 million? Tell me down in the comments. And if you want to truly support the trenches of this channel, become a channel member today. We are building something genuinely legendary here at NFL Nexus, and we need you on the active roster.
The ledgers are full. The contracts are drawn. The safety room is a volatile powder keg just waiting for a single spark in training camp. Head coach Sean Payton and general manager George Paton are staring down a financial barrel that will fundamentally define the trajectory of this franchise for the next decade. Do you pay for the legacy, or do you gamble on the future? When the dust finally settles in Denver, who will be left standing? The clock is ticking, and time pays no one. I'll see you next time on NFL Nexus.